Right now, most leaders in higher education aren't struggling with ideas. They're dealing with everything hitting all at once: budget pressure, AI, way too many initiatives, with no clear way to move forward at today's speed of change. So the real question is, how do you actually execute without breaking the institution? I'm Wayne Bovier, and this is Transformed. If you're a president, provost, vice chancellor, CIO, or VP leading change under pressure, you're in the right place. No theory, no fluff, no vendors. Just real conversation about what's working, what's not, and how to move faster, prioritize better, and actually get things done. Welcome. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Transformed. I'm Wayne. Right now, most leaders in higher education aren't struggling with ideas. They're struggling with everything hitting all at once and no clear pathway to move forward. And that's what this show is about: how leaders navigate that pressure and actually move institutions forward anyway. Today, I'm joined by Kellie Campbell, CIO at the University of Vermont. And I'm thrilled to have Kellie here with me. Kellie brings a very unique perspective to this conversation because she's not just leading IT. She spent her career inside institutions, working across academic, operational, and technology leadership roles. Before UVM, she served as CIO and vice president for the Vermont State Colleges system and as CTO at Vermont Technical College, helping lead through system-level complexity, consolidation, and change. She's also deeply involved in the broader higher ed and technology community, serving on boards like Northeast Research and Education Network and the Vermont Technology Alliance. And what stood out to me in our earlier conversation is this: Kellie isn't just thinking about IT as a function. She's thinking about how IT becomes part of how the institution actually operates, how strategy connects across the university, and how you move forward from planning to sustained execution. Kellie, welcome to Transformed.
Wayne, thank you so much for the warm welcome and for having me. What do you want to talk about today?
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive right in. Let's talk. I want to start with the pressure, this concept of pressure. You said something earlier in our conversation that really struck with me, that a lot of work is shifting from, hey, we launched this program, to how do we sustain this as a continuing way to operate? I'd love to get your color on that. Obviously, moving into cloud and SaaS systems, there's a continuous upgrades that happen. And so I'm kind of curious from you, how do we sustain this across the institution going forward?
Yeah, great question, Wayne. So you might not know my background, kind of quote, growing up through IT was through the educational and instructional technology side of IT. So my career started with the opportunity to really work closely with faculty and students, right? Understanding how technology can support and impact their teaching and learning and outcomes. And if you work in that sector, we love the word pilot. We love the word trying something and figuring out if it works, and then trying new things and thinking about scalability and all of those things. And I think that mindset has really carried with me, but I also, in my seat as CIO now, have really had to think about scalability and impact in a very different way. Right. And so whether you're talking about a project or an initiative, right, this exciting phase, especially in the technology sector, around launching something, but how does it truly impact, embed, and then how do you sustain that across the university? So the mindset that I've really tried to carry forward in the work is, first and foremost, thinking about, while I still encourage pilots and I still encourage experimentation, I think a lot about outcomes and measuring, right? Monitoring and measuring impact of initiatives, being willing to let go if something does not work, and being willing to try something new. But probably more important than the technology, I think about the structure and people side of sustainability. I think we underestimate frequently how critical it is to think about the intersection of people, technology, process, all of those things connected in a really, really deep way. So sustainability for me, as I think about the technology enterprise and the work that we try to do, I really lean more into what is the structure of the organization to sustain that initiative? Does it require thinking differently? And what are the people we wrap around it? And I think sometimes we miss the mark as technology leaders of really connecting those strategies to scale and ensure impact, positive impact.
I love that. You and I started in higher education in the same vein. I came in through Blackboard, so the academic
Okay.
computing side is really where I cut my teeth in higher education. So you and I have a similarity there. So, given your role now, right, and this is just a follow up to the pressure, given your role now, but also considering kind of the system level, right? Where are you seeing, and this is not to get anybody in trouble or department in trouble, but where are you seeing things really breaking down? And where do you see the biggest obstacles to kind of achieving what you just described?
Mm. I think, again, I'm speaking with my CIO hat here, but I think it really is when we don't think about technology as strategy. Right. One of the things I talk a lot with my leadership team about, and it's been a major focus of mine since joining the University of Vermont, and it was a major focus in my previous work you highlighted, is that technology is an accelerator. It is the backbone. It is a division where we get to see like behind the curtain of all of the operations across the university, right? We get to look under hoods and see what's working, and see what's not working. And, having the opportunity to do that, can also, if positioned correctly, allow us to really accelerate improvement and enhance experience and improve services. And so I do think there's a mindset shift that really needs to happen. And we've been talking about this as CIOs for a long time, right? We've been talking about it in terms of who do we report to in terms of our direct reports. Do we report to the president? Do we report to somebody else? How do we think about governance, right? We've been talking about this for some time. So it's not a new topic, but I still don't think higher ed more broadly has completely figured it out. And it may look different at different universities and different schools. But I do think that when we continue to see IT as plumbing in the world that we are living in with AI and security and so many of the topics, if we're not seeing it as kind of core and center to the strategy, we're not positioning in a way to not only support the impact we need to make, but the sustainability piece that you and I talked about a moment ago.
I completely agree. And I'm seeing that, in small institutions, community colleges, all the way up to large institutions like UVM. And so let's build on that, and talk about embedding strategy. You just mentioned it about strategy. A lot of institutions are wrestling with this. The idea that IT can't just have its plan of its own, right? It has to show up inside of everyone else's plan. And we're probably a long way from an ideal, but
Right.
and think about those that are paying attention to this conversation, right? Like,
Mhm.
everyone's along this journey somewhere, and for you, what does this look like in practice today? Can you
Mm.
describe how you're making strategy a more central part to your team, as well as the other teams that are, across the departments, the academics? Can you say a couple things about that?
Yeah, for sure. So when I started at the University of Vermont just over 1 year ago, my first 90 days were really a listening session, and higher and leaders, we say that, right? The best answer you can say when somebody says, what are you going to do in your first 90 days, is you're going to listen to your community, right? I think that's a predictable answer you would get from a leader. But, I really truly mean when I say my priority was to listen to folks and really develop a plan that embedded all of that feedback. And it wasn't just my division's feedback, right, in terms of their experience as IT professionals across this university, but it very much was the academic enterprise. It was the administrative enterprise. It was our students. And we created a directional plan. My team was really highly interested in, like, is this a strategic plan? What is this? And I said, no, this is just a redirectional plan. This is taking all of the feedback that we've heard from our community and thinking very differently about how we start to steer the ship. And while that plan would live separate from others' plans, what the intention of that plan was to truly start to realign with the intention to embed. And that plan, Wayne, had 4 pillars to it. And the first 2 pillars were really focused on operations, foundations, but one whole pillar committed to the people part of the work. And I think sometimes as technology leaders or technology divisions, we miss the mark of just how important the people part is in our planning, right? They are the bridge into their operations, into the experiences they deliver to our students. And they're the ones that carry out their plans. So we had to really make a commitment to partnership in a very different way. And that's been an immense focus over the past year. And it's wonderful timing because UVM has just launching our new strategic plan, which is Green, Gold, and Bold. And what I so appreciate about having a year kind of runway, for lack of a better term, is that we've shifted our division into the people focused part of our work. And now, as we launch out our strategic plan, we have the relationships to start embedding into the strategies of all of our partners across the university. So it's really been kind of intentional in terms of layering the work. And now, what a wonderful thing for some of my colleagues to say, hey, Kelly, we're working on our plan. Who from your team can be part of thinking through that? And so it's been shifting the culture, shifting the conversation to be the person that people think about when they're starting to plan their work across their division. Is it perfect? No. But is it more embedded than maybe it's been in the past? For sure.
It's in order to be successful of embedding strategy, you have to tackle both structure and mindset, both within your organization and outside your organization. That you kind of have to do both at the same time. Would you agree with that?
100%. And I think the structure is, I'll equate that more internally for my division. We've had to make some we had to do some reorganization across my division over the past year to say, how do we structure ourselves to be able to shift and do that work? How do we shift to being an educational and mission driven kind of IT division? It's a different mindset. It's not that people don't care about that, but are they structured in a way to support that work? And then the culture piece, right, is really the mindset. How do we start to shift the culture that is the default? And one of the things I talk to my team a lot about too is some of the work we're going to have to do is going to feel really fast, but we have to prove some wins and we have to prove our IT value, our leadership value. And we've been able to do that in some really key ways that I think our partners across the university now see us as, oh, we understand what you mean when you say IT is really a strategic driver, not just infrastructure, right?
I mean,
And
that's
sometimes
again
people
really,
have to,
yeah,
yeah,
really
they have to
exciting
be
that you're
sold.
making that progress within 12 months. I mean, that is, that shows kind of a willingness, across the institution, which, a lot of people get bad raps in certain departments across higher education for resisting that. And so let's bring this down a little
Mm,
bit, because, strategy is one thing, which is, I completely agree with everything that you just said, but we're now moving from this mindset of a kind of I'll classify it in a couple different ways. One is a fixed mindset to growth mindset. And specifically, let's talk about projects to continuous improvement.
mm,
And when we talked, right, you said something that, I think is really real for most higher ed leaders. And that is moving away from this concept of check the box, we're done. But because that basically says, all right, now we get to move on to the next. But there's this idea of, especially cloud software, it's never done, right? There's always
right,
updates that are happening, and it's an imperative for the institution to absorb those capabilities to stay on the leading edge. And
right.
so I would love to get you to, on that topic. It's like, how do you actually build a culture where improvement is continuous, not just tied to projects? Knowing full well, again, we're all on this journey,
Hmm.
nothing's perfect, but how do you build that culture?
Yeah. This has probably been one of the largest areas of focus for me over the past, especially 3 to 4 months. I think when you and I had a chance to connect earlier, Wayne, I talked a little bit about our change management initiative here at the university. And this started pretty early on when I first started, is really looking across the university and the enterprise and saying, who are those key players that are really embedded across the organization? They have this wonderful mix of kind of deep history and understanding of the university, those common ground values we carry, and are willing and interested to propel forward. Just maybe don't know how to get there, maybe want some encouragement, support, resources, etc. And so there's been a community of about 45 folks that we've brought together across the university, broadly representing the whole university, and we've put them through a change management development program. And we just very recently shifted them into a community of practice. And we're really wrapping that community together in a way that is meeting monthly and talking through not the siloed change that we seek to make at this university, but the broad impact we seek to make and how we are all really critical pieces of that puzzle. Um, and so I do think one of the values we're going to carry forward in terms of thinking about this continuous mindset are these communities of practice, because I think it's really easy to say we're going to do this new thing and we need to bring somebody in to do it. if we're going to move our organization into this more agile, continuous mindset, we have to invest in the people in our workforce to do that work, right? We have some fantastic people across this university who were creatures of habit. We've done this work for so long, and people always have maybe have not always been supported in being able to think differently about their work, being able to take a project or an initiative or even a very specific thing they do every day and make it better. And that really, it comes from the people. And so I laugh a little bit because I think people are like, you're a CIO. Why are you caring so much about, maybe what might be perceived as HR work? And it's like, because it is so connected. So the focus in the continuous mindset, Wayne, is to really bring these communities together, wrap resources around them, give them an invitation to work together. Most of the time that work is connected to technology, right? Hence my high interest.
Software runs everything,
100%, right? So we can take projects through this group, but we can also take a number of other initiatives through this group and start to kind of organically grow that across the university.
I think that's a great idea, this community of practice, and putting some structure around that, getting cross divisional department groups together, working on that. I think that's a great idea. And I'd love to stay, in tune with you on how that evolves, because I think that is a good way to bring folks together. So let's take the next step now. Let's talk about structure and execution. When we talked, you mentioned that you oversee, the PMO, the project management office, which I think is a big deal, right? And it makes a lot of sense. Not all PMOs report into the CIO. So I'm kind of curious, let's continue to build upon what we've talked about so far, which is, this concept of strategy and execution. How does that, in terms of PMO, change your ability to connect that strategy to execution across the university?
It's the vehicle that everybody can get in to get from point A to point B, right? I cannot emphasize enough, and my team has heard me talk about this a lot, how critical kind of program project management is in terms of helping carry out strategic initiatives, strategic projects. And I will potentially bias in that, right? Like I have some background in leadership and program management. So, but, I think there's examples here at the university of where that's proven so valuable, but I'll give you maybe a quick example, Wayne, that also was connected to my work at the state college system, right? And so as you and I have had a chance to discuss, one of the big initiatives that I helped support at the state college system was the consolidation of 5 separate campuses really into one to launch Vermont State University. And I recall very vividly when the chancellor pulled a small group of us together and said, guess what we're doing? We're building a new university. And from so many folks sitting in that room, it was like, where do you even start?
Right.
Where do you even start? Right. And so one of the best things we did at the state colleges is we hired a director of transformation who really came in and brought a program management structure to that, where we brought people through a discovery phase, a design phase, an implementation phase, and an execution sustainability phase. And that was fundamentally critical for getting people from here to here, right, to doing the work that we have to do. And so here at the University of Vermont, one of the reasons early on I appreciate, the president supporting the concept of the PMO reporting into me is because so many of the projects that we are undertaking right now around modernization, investing in this university have an IT foundation to them. And if we don't think through the whole approach of what is the scope of that? What is the impact of that? What are the resources needed to do that? What is the timeline around that? Right? We can just spin in an open-ended list of projects that people only have, 5% of their time to move forward every day. So it's given us a structure to say, okay, these are the priorities. We're going to put some structure around them, and we're going to provide the vehicle for people to navigate and drive towards outcomes. And that's been really, really critical to move initiatives along. The other quick thing I would say related to maybe the continuous improvement and agility framing here is I also have asked the PM office and some of our key partners to think about more of like an agile sprint mindset to our work. I think in higher ed, I work here, so I appreciate it, but we could spend a lot of time talking. And sometimes we miss the mark of saying some of the work we just need to get done. So using the PMO office to say, here's some things that we can move quickly on. We can get from point A to point B pretty quickly. And here are the things that we need to put more structure around. So not everything needs to be project managed, project managed, project managed. It's just providing different solutions and structures to meet the needs of our work and the impact we seek to make.
Yeah. I mean, I think you positioned that really well. So, let's dig into this even a little bit deeper, right? Like, when you think about when it comes to execution, you think about the role of the PMO, capacity, right? This concept of capacity tends to be, especially in a siloed environment and shared governance, which every institution is kind of structured that way. There again, what I think, and especially now we're officially in the AI world, right? There's too many
Right.
priorities, not enough capacity. And so, where do you see that problem? Is it really truly a capacity problem, or do you think it's kind of something else that's really, causing the misalignment?
Yeah. Three thoughts. One, is there a lot of work to do, and is it constantly hitting our plates 100%? So I think it's fair to say there's some component of it that is challenged by capacity. I do think, just with my operational mindset and kind of PM mindset, I think we also don't always maximize our time in the best way valuable, right? I think we can spend a lot of time doing things that could be more efficiently done with the right structures, right? So again, hence I always lean into, you can get from point A to point B, but without structure, it's probably going to take you this amount of time. If you use some structure, it might take you this amount of time. So I think there's an efficiency here, however much people don't always appreciate that term. I think structure can support some efficiency and kind of resource management to allow you to do that work more effectively, whether that's staged or structured in ways that allow you to do that. But I think the third piece that we've been talking a lot about recently at this university is, what do we let go of? And I think in higher ed,
Which is
that's
a
really
hard
hard
one,
for,
right? Which is
ooh,
a really hard one.
we want to be everything to everybody, because most folks that work in this industry, right, we deeply care. We deeply care about our university, our students, our community, our impact. It's really, really hard to let go. And during the state college transformation, we had to have a lot of conversations around, what do we let go of? Because not everybody can move all their furniture into the house, right? Some people have to let their furniture go. And here at the university, we're at this really exciting intersection of getting ready to launch our plan, where we need to be able to put resources and momentum and energy into that plan that will require us to shed a little bit. And so the change management community of practice I spoke to you about, I just met with them the other day, and I said at the very end of our session together, I said, I want you to write down one thing you plan to let go of over the next couple of months. And it was really hard for folks. And so I think back to the people mindset, the change management mindset, how do we support people through that process? People are so habitual, right? How do we give people space to think about that? How do we support people with letting go of some work? Because you and I both know change is never going to end. New things are never going to stop coming and hitting our plate. We have to kind of build this resilience
That's right.
to navigate it.
Which for Higher Digital, I mean, like that's the reason I founded Higher Digital, right? Is how do we help institutions change faster? And that's obviously before COVID and AI and operational efficiency. I was just talking to a CIO earlier this week who I've recorded a podcast with, and they had two pieces of software that did the same thing, and was spending double the amount of money, and he made the decision to terminate one of those, right, and consolidate everyone. And that caused a big uproar, right? Because
Right.
if part of this is who moved my cheese, and the other is no, I really like that tool. I don't want to learn something new. So,
Right.
but economically, it was the right thing to do for the institution. But just the amount of effort and energy to spend on making sure that people understand why we're doing this, the
Right.
impact this is going to have. Yes, we're going to support you with this change process. I mean, that's going to be continuous. It's got to be continuous.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and it all comes back to people, right? It all
All it
comes
comes
back
back
to
to
people.
people. It's funny, in the AI world, we're now becoming more human centric,
Hmm.
in many ways, and
We are.
and I'm a liberal arts guy. And so I
Hmm.
believe very strongly, right, that the humanity component is going to be more important in the AI world versus less.
Yes,
So,
very much so.
let me transition a little bit on a personal side, and we'll kind of wrap it up here soon.
Yeah.
Look, on a personal level, right? You said you started about a year ago in this new role.
Hmm.
And this is kind of a new segment that we're doing on Transformed. What has changed the most for you over the past year, couple years? What have you learned in your career, maybe on your personal side? Like, what have you learned that you could potentially share with others?
Oh yeah. There is no shortage of it. You know, I think there's a couple of values I've always carried, but I've really had to lean into them through my state college work and through joining the University of Vermont and the work that we're doing here. There's really three things that I talk to the team a lot about that have just continued. Like I said, they've always been kind of values I've carried, but they've just bubbled up as like really critical North Stars for me in terms of how I make decisions and how I structure the work to be able to do the work I want to do, right? And the first has been really grounded maybe on the more personal side of vulnerability and transparency in a way that can be really hard to do as a leader. I think people look to leaders to have all the answers. I think people, don't always recognize how, quote, lonely it can be at the top, right? You kind of look to your left and right. And of course, I have wonderful colleagues and peers to navigate, but, there's no other CIO within this university to
No,
look at, right? It's
and
me.
everybody's coming to you. Yeah.
Everybody's coming to me, right? So I think it's been leading more into vulnerability and transparency where I can. And I think that's humanized the work in a really important way. So that's been a huge one. I talk a lot with my team about shared accountability. And what I mean by that is a couple of different things. One, the team I build around me to support me is really important. That sounds like a selfish statement, but I can't do it all. And so it's really important that at the leadership level, I'm thinking about the team I wrap around me so that, when we're together, we're kind of, quote, stronger. But I've talked more broadly across my division around the concept of leadership and followership and the importance of we all have shared accountability in the success of this institution and the success of our division. Everybody is a critical puzzle piece in this puzzle we seek to create. And so just because I have a, quote, title, we need to shift from this like traditional hierarchy to thinking more about shared ownership, kind of a different structure where everybody can be a leader and everybody can be a follower. And we have to feel that as a shared, team. And that's a little bit of a mindset shift for some folks, right? That I don't have to make the call on everything. Right? We all own a piece of it. And so how do we empower people across all layers of the organization? That has been so critical to do the rapid work, especially at the state colleges that I sought to do. And then I've had to, maybe the last piece, Wayne, I've had to let go of perfection, right? I think you really want strong outcomes and you really want strong impact, but I have had to really lean into this good to great mindset. If we can make something even a little bit better, let's do it. Let's not kind of get overwhelmed by making it perfect with a bow on top, right? So my team will also hear me say this good to great mindset, right? Has been something that I've really had to lean into. And I'm leaning into it here at UVM, but I will say when we were doing the state colleges work, it was like, we want to build this perfect university that's going to have such impact and, immense work came out of that. But I will say not everything could be perfect out of the gate. Everything had to be iterative. And I think the iterative approach is something I'm taking here at this university as we, seek to really make big impact pretty quickly.
Yeah, perfect. There's a couple of reactions I have to that. So perfect, is a point of view, right? There is, I don't believe there is such thing in today's world. It's just an opinion. And it sounds like you and I are kind of on the same journey, like, embracing vulnerability and transparency. I've always been inherently transparent. The vulnerability one has I've had to lean into, and by the way, part of this new transformed is me leaning into being a little bit more vulnerable on this.
Good for you.
So well, let's wrap up. This is a new segment that we're doing. Love to have fun with this. Call it quick rapid fire. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions and love just get to what's top of mind for you as part of this. So if you're good with that, let me start.
Okay.
What do you think? And this is generic, by the way, not necessarily CIOs. One thing higher ed leaders need to stop doing.
That you can do it alone. Partnership will be key.
Love it. One thing higher ed leaders need to start doing.
Focus and scale. You can't be everything to everybody.
What's one thing leaders are overcomplicating right now? You can't say everything.
AI. Yeah, well, no, yeah, I think AI, and I just have to give a quick explanation to this because I think people are trying to put their arms around it. You're going to have to create short-term plans, short-term goals. Like the game is going to continue to change on that forefront. Stop trying to wrap your arms around it. Put some structures in place, some guardrails in place. Um, you're going to need to be agile.
Love it. Two more questions.
Yeah.
And you may have answered this already, but what's one habit or practice that's made you a better leader recently?
Better self-care. Time to just think and take care of myself more. It's not
Yeah,
easy to do, but
you and I
you
are on the
have
same
to.
path. It's a different world. It's no longer 9 to 5 to be in a factory and then go home. It is 24/7. And our
Yes.
new responsibility, and this is what I tell my team, is it's my responsibility and yours to shut down, right? This is a marathon, not a sprint. And, you're always working. So make sure you're conscious about taking care of yourself. So
Yes.
love that. One word to describe the next 3 years in higher education.
Um, I know it's convergence or intersection. Everything is coming together.
I agree.
How we navigate that
I agree.
will be
Well,
critical.
Kellie, this has been awesome. Thank you. I very much appreciate our previous conversation, this conversation, and what I really enjoyed about this is it's real, right? You're living
Mm,
this. You're being vulnerable as well on this podcast, so I very much appreciate that. And this isn't theory. This is what it looks like in trying to move a very complicated institution forward. You're doing a great job, and I think you got a great handle on everything. And so, especially while trying to juggle everything coming at you at once. And so, and I think what you said about shifting from projects to continuous way of operating, that's the work. That's what makes sense for other institutions that are listening in. So, thanks again for you, Kellie, for being here,
thank you.
and to everyone else listening and now watching. This is Transformed, where we focus on how institutions move forward when the pressure is real, the stakes are high, and everything is coming at once.
Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you for listening to Transformed. If this conversation made you rethink how work actually moves or gets stuck inside your institution, share it with somebody on your leadership team. Because this isn't about more ideas. It's about getting the right things done when everything's competing for your attention. For more, visit hire.digital/podcast or follow us on LinkedIn. I'm Wayne Bovier. Let's keep moving forward together.